Let's look at some other sensory motor interventions. One of my very favorites is lengthening the spine, because with depression, with that heaviness, right, I can create it by just saying, I'm depressed. I'm really depressed. I'm really depressed. And I can feel my whole body collapsing. So if you hear the words of hopelessness or you see the collapse, say the following to the client, and I'm going to give you the exact wording because there's a reason for it. We say, notice what happens if you just lengthen your spine from the lower back up. And I always say, don't sit up straight the way your mother told you. Just lengthen your spine from the lower back up. And usually it's not difficult to do, right? And it's really interesting. You can try this at home. Because if I say, see what happens if you sit up straight, right? My shoulders come up and my back kind of reluctantly follows. And it feels effortful. If I lengthen my spine from the lower back up, then my shoulders are coming up with the lower back. It's much less effort. We need interventions that don't require much effort because the depressed client won't have the energy. Orienting. Right? Dogs do it all the time. It's when they start sniffing around, they're orienting. They do it through the sense of smell. We do it visually. Although it's interesting, I've worked with clients who are visually impaired who do it auditorially. So when we look around and we notice our environment, it usually increases parasympathetic arousal and brings us up into the window of tolerance. And what I do with depressed clients particularly is I say, just look very carefully around the whole room and tell me the one thing you like the least in my office. And they kind of wake up. Oh, I can tell you this is what I don't like. They say, yeah, look very carefully. And you could find the two things that you dislike the most. And so suddenly their nervous systems begin to have more energy because I created novelty. Notice what happens if you assume that the depression belongs to just one part of you. Does that feel better or worse? 90% of people say it feels better. And then I love to use what we call in sensory motor verbal experiments. Let's notice what happens to the depression when you repeat those words, I'm a hopeless case. Does the depression get better or does it get worse? And most people, usually I ask, do you feel better or do you feel worse? And most people say, I feel worse. And then I say, okay, let's just try some different words. What happens, and you don't have to believe the words, just what happens when you say the words, I'm doing the best I can? And most clients immediately take a breath. Oh, that feels a little better. I found those words, I'm doing the best I can, to be the best antidepressant verbal experiment words. Because the old, some of you may remember Stuart Smalley from Saturday Night Live. It doesn't work to have people say, I love myself, I'm beautiful, I'm wonderful. It doesn't work because their bodies don't believe it. But I'm doing the best I can. I've had clients who said, well, I'm not really doing the best I can. And then I thought, well, I guess I am doing the best I can. So, and I said, well, it doesn't matter whether you believe them or not. Let's just say them. In internal family systems, the depression is always reframed as a part, because IFS is a parts-based method. And we help the client be more curious. How old is that part? Can you ask that part to show you a picture that might explain why she's so depressed? Let's be curious about the burden this child is carrying. In EMDR, target the blocking beliefs associated with depressive states. And like I'm worthless. And then help the client float back to the earliest time he or she can remember having that thought. And then process that memory, that moment in time. I find that works better than trying to find the first or the worst. And you can use EMDR resource development, of course, to try to build resources that increase energy. I don't worry about self-esteem because the self-esteem will increase as there is more energy in the body. Objectify the depression. I love to treat the depression as other. That depression is so sly and cunning. Or I say, oh my God, you believe that? Oh, I probably forgot to tell you, depression is such a liar. Because when it tells you you're a piece of crap, when the depression tells you that no one cares, it's lying. Okay? And then don't try to help hopeless clients have more hope. Go with the resistance. And I say, well, it can be dangerous to hope. Right? Hope is risky. And usually, to be honest, what I say most of the time is I say, don't worry about hope, because I have enough hope for both of us. So hope will come, but it will come when you start to feel better. For the moment, just borrow mine. And I have, as many therapists do, a little bowl of stones in my office. And I ask the client to look through the bowl and find the stone that epitomizes hope. And I say, okay, now you've got some of my hope, and you just take your stone with you. And remember, when you feel hopeless, remind yourself that you're borrowing mine. Okay, I'm just dropping the content, another amazing sensory motor technique. Very simple. I'm just going to change my screen a little bit so you can see my hand more easily. So I say to the client, imagine you put a burning hot potato in this hand. What's this hand going to do? And universally they go like that. I don't ask them to put out their hand. I put out my hand and I say, if I put a burning hot potato in this hand, what's that hand going to do? And then I make this motion and I see they make this motion. And I say, okay, every time you have that thought, I'm worthless, I'm a failure, drop it like a hot potato. And then we have to practice that technique in therapy. Every time they say, I'm a loser, I'm a failure, I'm stupid, I have to say, drop it, and make the movement to stimulate that. So they begin to get new procedural learning. Encourage movement. Don't be afraid. If you have a very hyper-aroused client, don't be afraid to use movement. This sounds terrible. But bear with me. I say to the client, I say, I've been sitting all day. Would you mind terribly if we stood up? Of course, that's harder in the days of video conferencing, but we could do it, right? We could stand up with our computers. You have lots of energy yourself, which is hard sometimes when you're sitting with a client. And don't push for more affect, because hypoarousal is a symptom of phobia of affect.